Welcome to the Communicating Earth podcast by Climate Acceptance Studios, the podcast by and for climate and nature communicators. If you work in communications at a company or organisation dedicated to addressing the climate, nature and environmental crisis, or if you just want to understand the latest in research and examples of how best to communicate these complex problems, this podcast is for you. This week, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Tamsin Bishton, who's come on board recently at our head of comms for Climate Acceptance Studios. She comes with 30 years experience, so I'm really excited to chat with her. And I met her first at Content Rising, an amazing convening of climate communicators at Wakehurst in West Sussex last summer. Tamsin, welcome.
Thanks, Tom. Exciting to be talking to you.
How was Content Rising for you in the end?
Content Rising was amazing, wasn't it? Yeah. It was quite a day. It was 18 months in the planning. So it felt kind of miraculous when it actually happened. And it was really beyond my wildest dreams in terms of who was there in the tent and the conversations we had and the connections that were made and the ripples that I keep seeing beyond. Yeah, it was a good day, and it was great to be connected with you and with Climate Acceptance Studios. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we are very much based in our theory of change, which we're writing right now, around this principle that it's stories of action that inspire climate action as opposed to the raising of awareness. The raising of awareness has been done. All surveys prove it. So let's start off with, why do you think more action is not being taken?
Okay, so I think I actually want to take issue with that question, which
Okay, I like it.
is me. It's me all over, as you know. So I think actually we're reaching a moment where we see that we've taken much more action than maybe we thought we had, and that is the action that's been quietly going on at the local level and the individual level. So I like to always get a good bit of a gardening metaphor going when I'm talking about these issues. So if you're a gardener, you know that there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on, even when it looks like there's nothing happening, either in your plant pot or in your planter or your little bit of garden. But actually there's microbes doing their thing in the compost. If there's frost, it's making the soil more friable. If there's rain, that's going to help with your germination. So I think that's what's been happening. So just to frame my answer to the question, first of all, but yeah, obviously on the macro level, it can feel like not enough action has been taken, and the bold hard facts around what's going on with our climate, how much greenhouse gases there are in our atmosphere, what the trajectories look like. It hasn't been enough action at that level for sure. And I think the reason is I'm a historian at heart, so I always have to take quite a long view with these things. Basically, we've had 6 centuries of colonialism and racialized capitalism, and we're trying to push back against that momentum and those jealously guarded resources, right, by through those centuries. So that's why
I see. So you see it through a climate justice lens.
I certainly do see it through a climate justice lens, yeah. So I think in the context of, what we're up against in terms of, centuries of a system doing things a certain way, it's psychologically really hard for us to even see that there's action that we can take to do things differently. That just takes like such a massive effort of imagination. And on a practical level, we have to be 1,000 times more inventive and like maybe infinitely more careful with the resources that we do have. And we keep being told that no one but us cares and that we can't win. So, that's quite a lot to be pushing against. So, yeah, I think those are some of the reasons why at those big levels the action that could have been taken much sooner hasn't been. But I do feel optimistic that there's a lot of less visible action that has been going on that is going to really fruit and flower very soon. I think maybe we're already starting to see it. So yeah, I take a sort of a balanced view on that question.
Very good. Well, why don't we start talking about one of those invisible, maybe, or maybe it wasn't so invisible after your communications work, story of action that you've worked on in your career. So this is what we're going to do with the podcast each week. We're going to have our guests talk about a specific story of action they work on, and we're going to frame the narrative of the podcast around that. So, Tamsin, what is yours?
Okay, so the story of action I want to tell you about is from 2019, and I've deliberately chosen this because it's a story when maybe from a time with communications where video wasn't feeling so accessible. Because otherwise, I feel like you just tell me off that there was no video involved in this story.
Not at all. Not at
But
all.
it's from 2019 when I was working as I was leading communications at Rewilding Britain, and we had a campaign called the Climate Breakdown campaign, which feels really kind of general, doesn't it now? But at the time, it felt kind of specific for the charity, which has a focus. Obviously, if you don't know the charity, it has a focus on landscape scale rewilding happening across Britain, which is nature recovery primarily. So, it was a campaign that was about helping to join the dots between climate change and what's happening with nature. Guess what? It's all part of the same thing, which I realized when I was sort of thinking about this in 2026, that doesn't feel so like you have to spell that out in the same way that you did. But yeah, at that time, those things were feeling quite separate. I mean, I don't know. You might have thoughts about how true that is. I know you talk to a lot more communicators in this sector, globally. Do
Yeah,
you
I mean, I
feel
know,
that?
I know that there's, well, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I think there's generally maybe a resentment amongst the people who work on biodiversity loss, nature, that they play second fiddle to the climate people, the carbon in the atmosphere.
Mm,
And actually, ironically, nature breakdown is probably the more immediate threat than global warming. But
yeah,
again, maybe that is being addressed. I mean, especially with higher profile on oceans work right now.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but
Anyway, yeah,
yeah,
it's interesting, isn't it? But yeah, so in 2019, the focus of the campaign was that we wanted to activate our very engaged supporter base. So we'd done some research with our supporters at Rewilding Britain, and they were super engaged. And the number one thing that they were saying was, what can we do? Like, just tell us something that we can do. We want to take action, which, in the context of our wider conversation, doesn't feel, it feels totally congruent, right, with what the wider research around climate communications tells us. But nevertheless, that came back as quite a kind of like clear message that we were like, okay, so we need to give these guys something to do. And we wanted to raise the organisation's profile as a thought leader and an influencer on policy on the national stage, because Rewilding Britain was a sort of a bit of an upstart, troublemaking little charity at the time. And also, we wanted to make this connection between rewilding and nature restoration and climate change in people's thinking. Um, so we developed a campaign that was also going to key into what was happening in that spring of 2029. So uh, I don't know if you recall. In fact, I know for a fact that you do. That
Yeah,
was the
I do.
spring
I
when
know what was happening in the spring of 2019.
yeah, that was when Extinction Rebellion was really capturing the media agenda. The large scale protests in London. There was that moment where, you know, attention was grabbed, people connected and got onto the streets and protested, and felt like there was a lot of possibility around that. Obviously, there was young people involved in school strikes, so the Fridays for Future thing was in full swing. There was really this sort of what felt like at the time a bit of a tipping point around focus on climate change and its impacts. Like there was even that. Do you remember there was that show on BBC One, David Attenborough fronting it, that just talked about this is what climate change is. It is real. So, which had not really, David Attenborough had taken a lot of flack about that
Yeah,
for
so
not
he was this
really.
big sort of real strident activist coming out for the first time, wasn't it, really?
Yes, it was. Yeah. So there was all of that kind of groundswell we could see going on that we wanted to kind of catch that wave as well. So what we did was the strategy was that we were going to ground it in robust and irrefutable science on land use and carbon capture in the UK. That was right at the kind of very centre of it. Then we wanted to bring it to life visually, make it really eye-catching and appealing to a broad general audience, as well as the kind of people who were going to dig into the detail of that science. We wanted to activate that supporter base that we knew was there, who were really chomping at the bit for something to do. And we wanted to catch that, what we were calling like the green wave of that spring, and tie in with, there was a certain amount of legislative momentum around the new agricultural and environmental policies that were being discussed, like how to support farmers to be more nature friendly, that kind of thing. And the challenges were that we had, these are chestnuts, right? Very limited resources. It was a very
Surprise,
small
surprise.
team. Yeah, surprise, surprise. There was not millions of pounds to spend. It was a super small team. Um, it would have been very easy to get stuck in the detail of the science in the report, because actually it was pulling together a whole lot of research that hadn't been kind of presented in this way before. And there weren't that many spokespeople who were willing to directly champion rewilding at that time. So it was like quite a contested idea. It's quite controversial. Um, and we needed it to be accessible and engaging for a general audience if we were going to really kind of build momentum. So those were the key things that we were grappling with.
And so what did you do? What was the action?
Well, do you need the cliffhanger, or are we going straight into that?
Well, the cliffhanger is, how did you overcome the challenges? Like, so what did you do? Like, what were the biggest challenges that you faced in this project? So let's start off with that first of all. Like, what was the action, and what were the challenges that you faced?
Okay. So the challenges were what I've just outlined. The fact that we didn't have very much money at all, that we were operating in this kind of contested environment where if you said the word rewilding, you'd get quite strong polarized reactions to it. So what you needed really was something that was much more kind of an idea that people could kind of collect around and connect around rather than start arguing over. And even people who were very much in favour of rewilding would then argue about, oh, but how do you do it?
Right.
So it was, that was quite tricky. And then, this kind of dynamic of, okay, we need the science to be very, very robust and specific and detailed at the centre. But we need a big general audience to get behind the idea. And, those two things are not necessarily easy to marry in one single set of communications when you haven't got unlimited resources and time to spend. Oh, yeah, and that was the other exciting part, was that we had like this because of the way parliamentary stuff works, we had this sort of window of opportunity to do the campaign, and it was not a massive one in terms of timing. So all of the classics. So in terms of what we did, we produced a milestone report that was on land use and carbon capture, and is still referred to now in terms of just talking about what happens when you shift how you take care of the land to be focused more on, okay, we want to be drawing down carbon out of the atmosphere, and the carbon that's already being stored there, we want to keep it there. And, there's all kinds of amazing stats and facts contained in this report around, just things like, did you know that like moss and the amazing resource that we have, peatland and bogs in this country, like we have a really disproportionate amount of that kind of landscape compared to the globe as a whole, that in terms of its kind of carbon capture capacity, it's up there with forests and
Wow. Okay.
kelp kelp forests in the sea and so on. It's a really amazing resource that we have in this country in terms of taking carbon out of the atmosphere and keeping it stored safely. So that was at the heart of it. So that was a kind of very detailed science-led piece of writing. And we also made sure that it contains some really practical guidance about what does that mean then in practice in terms of protecting landscapes, restoring landscapes, and working with agriculture and farmers as partners with all of this, rather than, there can be a dynamic of, evil farmers ruining everything. It was about looking at kind of practical ways that dynamic could change. And we worked with an illustrator called Ed Harrison. So as I say, we didn't have access to video at that time, because at that time trying to make video was very, very expensive. We know that's not true now, but it was then. But we worked with an illustrator to create some really lovely, attention-grabbing visuals that brought to life like characters from the natural world, different landscapes and so on. And we deliberately briefed that so that they were like super flexible in their use, so they could be used in the report, in social media, on the website. And we deliberately debranded them, which feels counterintuitive, but the idea was we wanted it to be like shareable across partners. So rather than it being like, this is Rewilding Britain, here's our logo, here's our font, here's our colours, we made them kind of usable by any organisation who wanted to support the campaign. So it's about sharing rather than that kind of like, oh, this is ours mentality. And then we gave people this really tangible call to action for the wider public. And that was to put a signature on a petition, which might sound like, oh, big wow, I'm signing a petition. But we deliberately went down the route of using a parliamentary petition rather than, you can use your own kind of gatekeeping method of gathering people's signatures and data, which is, you know, is a useful mechanism in certain contexts for organisations where you're trying to build connection and a conversation with people. But we decided to go down the route of using the parliamentary platform, because that is the route that if you get a certain number of signatures, 100,000, you get a parliamentary debate. And if you get, I think it's 10,000, you at least get a response from the government. So we wanted people to feel that, okay, I'm just signing a petition, but the outcome of this action that I'm taking could be really significant. I'll be able to see it. I'll be able to kind of watch the debate when it happens. So we used that mechanism, and we switched our language. That was the other thing we did to deal with the challenge around rewilding as this contested issue. So instead of saying, let's rewild, the wording of the petition was that we want to restore nature on a massive scale to help stop climate breakdown. And you might have heard like the Restore Nature Now kind of call to action. It gets, you know, there's big marches from time to time and so on. It had in part its genesis in this campaign of talking about Restore Nature Now, because that language is just much less divisive and contested. So those are some of the things that we did. I need to stop and
So
take
you've
a
got this
breath.
big action where you're directly trying to get your messaging talked about in Parliament through 100,000 signatured petition. So what, I mean, obviously there is the finance, there is the funding, but what were the other challenges that you faced trying to get to that 100,000 target?
Well, obviously 100,000 people, that's a lot of people, right? There's noise at any time when you're asking people to pay attention to something and do something. And that was true then as it is now. So it was just about understanding, okay, can we kind of activate at this scale that we need? And that was about partnership and collaboration. So really taking the mindset of this is not our campaign, as in it's just Rewilding Britain's campaign. It's like this is a movement focused campaign, because we know very well that our supporters are also supporting all kinds of other organisations. They really, really care about nature, and they really, really care about the climate. So kind of broadening out our focus, and also then taking this to partner organisations and saying, what do you think? Can we do this together? This is a parliamentary petition. Can we get this debate to happen in Parliament together? You know, can we, you know, we've all kinds of different conservation and campaigning organisations have got key things that they're thinking about they'd like to get onto the political agenda, but actually there's a huge overlap here. So kind of taking that collaborative perspective, and the content strategy that I talked about was really kind of supported us to do that, because we didn't keep it on our own platforms, because we didn't create stuff that was branded specifically in a certain way. It made it accessible for everyone to get on board, and that's what happened. And I think also the timing was just amazing. You know, that moment that was happening of awareness and discussion about climate was, you know, that was just great to have something that we could respond with so rapidly as we saw that unfolding.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in partnership building and collaboration. And indeed, that's a big point of the Communicating Earth podcast. We're going to be having guests from different sectors on every week, and we're trying to act as a hub to knowledge share and encourage people to collaborate outside of their traditional silos.
Mm,
Okay, let's talk a bit more about partnership after the quickfire round. So
okay,
this is a section that we're getting going in the middle of the podcast. And Tamsin, are you ready?
I am.
Very, very
Take a deep
good. So
breath.
let's, so deep breath. Yes. Okay, here we go. So what's the first word that comes to mind when I say climate?
So just being brutally honest and speaking from the heart, it's grief, which can be
Fair enough.
quickly followed by rage. And if I'm feeling it's a good day, then hope.
And talking of hope, who's your greatest inspiration in our world of climate and nature communication?
I mean, there's so many people. I mean, I just have to say Joanna Macy, um, because reading her book, Active Hope, in whenever it was, quite a while ago, was game changing for me. I think the way she has communicated around the fact that we can do this. Yeah, number one. Also, just a big shout out to all of the younger people who are doing incredible things in this space. So I'm going to name check people like Chantal Lindsay, Lyra Valencia, Clover Hogan, who are just making this issue real, relatable, from a place of authenticity and hope. So yeah, those are my big inspirations.
Yeah, Chantal Lizzie is lovely. Um, what's your favorite communications channel?
My favorite communications channel is podcasts. Um, if it's that kind of one-way thing, I just love them. There's something about listening that really works for me if I want to get informed. And then also in person. So small groups are really good for sharing and not aloneness. And big community halls of people making decisions and taking action. I think that's unbeatable.
Yeah, everybody said face to face so far. Um, and would you say face to face is the most effective communications channel? And if it is, outside of face to face, what do you think is the most effective communications channel?
I think it's a trick question, Tom. Because I think effective for what? And I know that's an annoying answer, but you've got to start with your audience and what you're trying to achieve, and your realities and work from there. So I just don't think there is one most effective
Okay.
communications channel. But I know if you look at the data, and I have been looking closely recently, video is definitely up there for storytelling. The numbers don't lie on that. So, but yeah, I think it does depend.
Do you have a favorite stat or fact about climate and nature?
Yes. So when I was doing an MSc in social research methods a couple of years back, and I did my dissertation around nature connection and specifically connections between birds and humans. And there are so many wonderful stats around how when we spend time listening to birdsong as human beings, just amazing things happen with our well-being and our health. And the specific one is that did you know that there is a cave in Spain, in southern Spain, that has drawings, cave paintings of birds from 10,000 BCE? And there are at least 16 identifiable species of bird in that cave art. And they're doing things like grooming, or nesting, and there's apparently even a painting of a bird having a poo in that art.
Very good. Yeah, maybe Nathaniel, who's also part of our team, he lives in the south of Spain. Maybe he knows about that cave.
Yeah.
What's the one climate myth or misconception or piece of misinformation that you wish you could eradicate from the world forever?
If we could just delete the idea that fossil fuel-based capitalism is what makes life easier, happier, and more free. Just imagine what we could do.
Very good. Where'd you go for your information? What's your number one source of climate information?
So, it's at the moment, it's a combination of a whole slew of brilliant podcasts just started up, including this one. So, yeah, those are great. LinkedIn, I love. And actually, if I'm being completely honest, right now, there's a Substack that's called Sunday at Bill's Mother's, which is a really specific Sheffield focused weekly newsletter that is just packed full of the most amazing climate information translated into what it means if you live in Sheffield. I love it so much. So, yeah, those are my biggies at the moment.
Very good, very good. And finally, do you have a go-to analogy or metaphor to explain the crisis?
Yeah, explaining it is tricky, isn't it? I struggled with this. I found this the hardest one. What comes to mind for me when I think about it is, when you're stuck on the motorway in a massive traffic jam and all the information is telling you, Google's telling you, your traffic alerts are telling you, oh, there's basically some kind of awful thing going on ahead. There's been a big crash or something. You aren't going anywhere. And yet everyone's jostling in the lanes, like, "Oh, if I could
Okay.
just jump into that lane ahead, then this is somehow gonna get fixed." And it's like, no, what we really need to get off the motorway, because nobody wants to drive towards that crash. Like, moving forwards isn't gonna help us. So that's what I often think of when I think of how we are. But in terms of explaining it, yeah, that's for bigger brains than me, I think.
Okay. Well, maybe we have to not couch it in terms of explanation then. It's just more about bringing it to people's lives so they can then take action. I think that's very good, especially putting it in the context of our reliance on cars. So let's return back now to your campaign for Rewilding
Mhm.
Britain. And this is very much about practical tips and tricks beyond the sort of generalities of the strategy. So literally things like, I emailed this person, I went to these events, what have you. Tell me a bit more about how you built those partnerships to help get to those 100,000 signatures. What sort of tactics did you use?
Um, I mean, it just being in touch with people, being nice, listening, paying attention to what different organisations' priorities are, um, and yeah, asking what people might need, what might help them um, come
But
on
did you
board.
do an e-shot, or did you just network through and ask for referrals, or did you meet people at events? What practically did you do
Yeah,
to
I
build
mean,
those partnerships?
there was emails, there was e-shots that were managed by the partnerships person, funding and partnerships person. Honestly, I think there was a lot of person to person conversations as well. So sort of senior parts of the team were very, very connected and knew people, and they were out and about all the time at meetings, at doing sort of on the ground, uh, showing people what rewilding looks like type activities. There was a lot of that sort of stuff going on in the organisation. So that kind of that sort of multi-level relationship building, but it was very person to person, I would say. Email was
Hmm.
of course really important. It was massively important in terms of getting that 100,000, taking it to our supporter base, and emailing and then updating. Oh, look, we've got to 50,000. Chris Packham has said he's in. All of that sort of just keeping people with that feeling of momentum. Email was brilliant for that. At that time, Twitter was massively important as well. So we had a real amplification and that kind of multiplication effect with that platform, which is a dream when it happens, but not always easy to make happen. So that was about like a toolkit, making assets super easy to access and download and share. So that was another really useful approach. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else was good. I mean, obviously it was in combination with media, sort of, traditional PR, press release, that kind of stuff. And I
Okay.
really struggle to remember the name of it, but there's an organization who basically they put together press releases and then they do all um the distribution of that. So for a small charity, you don't have to have like super up-to-date media contacts lists and all of that. So yeah, it was a combination of lots of things. But I think at the
And would
heart
you
of
say
it,
that's the main learning you could take from the project is the importance of partnerships and partnership buildings, not trying to do it all yourself, bringing together a coalition, both to do the marketing and the PR on your behalf, with you acting as a hub at the centre. Is that a good strategy that you would
yeah.
advise to smaller NGOs out there who've got analogous
Yeah,
campaigns?
and I think really paying attention to the messaging, that so that you can make it easy for partners to feel like, yeah, this is something we can come on board with and support. It speaks to our priorities as well, and we know it speaks to the priorities of our supporters. So yeah, so kind of using language that um, is going to resonate with your partners and their audiences. Really, really important.
Very good, very good. Okay, so moving away from that project, as for the last section, we'll go on to more general opinions. So, let's start off with that. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received about climate communications, nature communications?
I mean, I think this is the best piece of advice I've ever received around communications, full stop. And it was in one of the first jobs that I had um, in digital communications. So back in the 90s, which is like think big and have your big ambitions, but start small. So yeah, time and time again, I think that holds true. If you're grappling with, you know, big issues, or if you're grappling with big targets, um, things that you're trying to change at scale that can, or influence at scale, that can feel really overwhelming. But if you start with the things that you can do, um, holding that bigger picture in mind, um, yeah, it
Yeah, I can
works,
appreciate that. That's something that I am, dealing with
Yeah,
on a daily basis
yeah,
for climate exception studios.
yeah, yeah, and it works, doesn't it? It works. It's like,
Mm.
you 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 tick off the things that you can do, and that builds momentum. And it's not that you shouldn't have that big picture in your mind, you know. So yeah, you do need to think big, and not be satisfied with just the small things ultimately. But yeah, start small.
And it's amazing what one person can do, the power
Yeah,
we all have as individuals in a global context, I think.
I think
Um, and
there's
also now with your 30 years experience behind you, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to someone starting out in their career, in this career right now?
Yeah, I struggled to limit this to 1. Um, I've got 3 if that's okay.
Okay.
So what the first one is have conversations, which is also a good piece of advice that was given to me. It's like just talk to people, especially if something feels difficult. Don't, like just have a conversation. Don't write an email. Um, don't send a text or a WhatsApp. Like talk to the person about it. But yeah, more generally, just more conversations are good. I think the other advice I would give is, if at all possible, and this is I realise could be quite challenging to actually identify, but if possible, develop your skills so they aren't completely tech reliant. Because it's so easy to be to be thinking, oh, I'll use this tech, and if I'm super skilled at this tech, then I'm all set, and then suddenly that tech isn't relevant anymore, or the tech just takes over your job, which I know we're all finding a bit of a challenge in the sector at the moment. And the third thing, and the
Mhm.
most important thing, is look after yourself in terms of your mental health, because this work in this sector is really hard. The subject matter is really hard. And like I said at the start, you can be made to feel that you're on your own, and that you're the only person who thinks the way that you do, even when you're working in this sector. So, yeah, find the ways to look after yourself that work for you, being outside more, whatever it is, and find the others. So don't do it on your own. Find the others and stay connected. I think that's really important if you want to work in this sector.
Very good. Yes, we are the majority. It's proven in every piece of research out there.
Yeah.
So the final question is, if you had all of the nature and climate communicators of the world listening to you right now, and you would say like, just do this one thing, all of you do this one thing cross sector, this one strategy, what would that be?
Um, So what I've written down is stop competing for the money and stop competing with the noise. I was listening this morning to a podcast about the project in Birmingham called Civic Square. I don't know if you know of it, but it's like this very inspiring story of a neighborhood who are trying to kind of do things totally different and be ready for what's coming in terms of climate and any other kind of shocks that we might be experiencing in coming decades. um, and there's a moment in their story where they've got this amazing community hub thriving, millions of people coming, and not millions, o- l- most of the neighborhood coming along, getting involved, feeling like, great, we're building this community vibe. And then they shut it down. And the reason they shut it down is because they realized that the more successful they were, the more rent they were going to have to pay to the landlord. And so they were like, we're not playing that game. We're going to find a way where we can have a community hub where we don't have to pay a landlord an ever increasing amount of rent, the more that we achieve for our neighbourhood. And they have done that. They've now got a location where the community owns the land in perpetuity. It's like this completely pioneering way of property sharing. So I think if we as communicators could take that mindset on of like, let's stop playing the game um, of this system that is rigged against us, and act together and support each other and learn from each other, and then tell our stories of what's already happening, what we've already achieved, championing the small things that add up to the big things. I just think that could be so, so powerful. Yeah.
Very good. What a great ending. Here, here. Tamsin, thank you very much for your time. And yeah, I mean, obviously, we're going to have a chat after this about the next step of CAS. But for now, that's the end. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.